hotels and taverns in Pennington.
In the old days?
Yeah, and apparently there was, quite a bit of push and pull there as to, because we have the record of when Pennington as a borough had a vote for prohibition.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then Pennington also was a big place for the Women's Christian Temperance Union, WCTU. Some of the main people were in Pennington. So it was a big push to get alcohol out of Pennington, and of course they never, after prohibition was rescinded, they never let it back in.
Okay, I am ready.
Was there a liquor license in Pennington those days?
No, well, I don't know if that's before licenses, before those days. I mean, there were taverns serving alcohol from the 1730s. There was the first tavern.
Back in those days, because my dad told me one day, he named the guy, which I have no idea now, but he was drunk, and as he went down the hall to go out back to the horses, he punched the wall, and he missed it and hit the 2x4, busted his arm. He said, serves you right. Drunked up.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we about ready to get going?
We are ready. I forget, did we start this last time with a little introduction?
Yeah, just a small introduction, yeah.
Okay.
Right, so I'll do that again.
Why don't you address that to this camera,
Mm-hmm.
and then after that, just ignore the cameras.
Okay. Is that up in the way, or am I?
What do you mean? You're in the picture here.
Oh, okay,
Is that
fine,
what you mean?
fine, yeah.
I can see you over there, David. You're looking good.
Okay, looking good, all right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, you can go.
Okay. Hi, my name's David Blackwell. I'm with the Hopewell Township Historic Preservation Commission, and we're going to have an interview this morning. It's April 25th, 2009, and we're very fortunate to have Bob Hoch with us this morning, whose family has been in the township for over a century and has done a lot of farming and obviously knows a lot about what has happened here over the last decades. So we're going to interview Bob this morning. It's one of a continuing series of interviews that we're doing to help preserve local history and raise awareness of what farming was like and the importance of keeping agriculture alive and vibrant in Hopewell Township. So good morning, Bob.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah, thanks. I'm happy that you agreed to do this. And it's a little new for all of us to sit in front of a camera, but we have good stories to tell, and hopefully people will find them valuable to understand.
I might be like my dad. As my dad was getting older, we decided that maybe we ought to record some of this. So we put a tape recorder on the dashboard of the car and rode around. And we said, "Dad, what's that?" He clammed up. But other days he would tell us stories about this place or that farm or this place. But that day we said, "How about Dad?" What? Huh? No, I don't know nothing about that. So we never got nothing on tape. Yeah. Okay.
Well, we already started talking a little bit this morning as we were setting up, and I guess we can start by saying that again that your family has been in the township for a long time, and I always associated your family with the farm there at the corner of Scotch Road and Washington's Crossing Pennington Road and the brick house there on the corner, so that'll kind of anchor where we're talking about for the folks listening. You said that your family moved there around 1910, more or less.
Yes, I'm quite sure that's the best date that I can come up with. It's right in that era anyhow, right.
And that was your grandfather and the family that he had, and immediately went into farming there.
Well, yeah. Is this after he left Colonel Kunkel?
Yeah, well, yeah, I started there,
own.
but yeah, we should jump back and say that your grandfather actually came to Hopewell Township. He was hired by Colonel Kunkel, and we can talk about Colonel Kunkel a little bit, but your father came here as a farm manager.
Right.
So that was what he did for a living, and something our grandfather, and he knew that very well, I'm sure.
Right. From either Lancaster or Shippensburg, we're not too sure, but it's right next door to each other.
Yeah. So he was already farming out in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And he was recommended to Colonel Kunkel?
Yeah, I don't know who it was. I recommended him, but he said, told Colonel Kunkel, "I have a good farm manager for you," and he talked him into coming east, and that's how we got here.
And Colonel Kunkel came here to Pennington in about 1890 or so. I don't have an exact date in mind, but and he proceeded to acquire some farms, and also he was very active in the development of Pennington. where were the early farms that he had?
Were you the fellow I talked to one night on the telephone? Was he really a colonel?
Well, we certainly know that he was involved in the Civil War. He did have a military position. He was called colonel here. That's a good question, because sometimes colonel ends up being just something you call an old soldier.
Anybody that made it home got to be a colonel out of it.
So he owned some farms next to Pennington on the east and further out on Old Mill Road. I guess maybe when you rode around with your dad, maybe he could say something about those couple of farms. What do you remember about those?
What I heard was that they, in those days, they would sit down and discuss how the year went, how much money they had made or whatever. And if they had a good year, Colonel Uncle would bonus. He would bonus your employee. They got bonuses in those days too. But and instead of giving them cash, you give them ground and land, because land was the cheapest thing going at that time. And we wound up with 2 farms on the east side of Pennington. My grandfather did, and sold them and came to the west side because the east side of Pennington's all swampy. It's all wet ground in those days, basically, and it was all marshy and whatever. That's what he probably gave him, the junk ground.
And what were they trying to grow over there?
All just normal crops, probably, hay and whatever.
Corn?
Corn and wheat. Wheat. Pennington was quite a wheat area. During the war, they put a lot of wheat out. But of course, that was the war effort.
Yeah, and in that case, you're saying Second World War. You're saying Second World War.
Yeah,
in that
World
case.
War II, right? Yeah.
And so the wheat was, how was the wheat sold then? Who was it sold to?
Came to the granary in town. Which was T.P. Reed in those days, but then the Harvard boys wound up there with it, ag grain or whatever. But yeah, that was there was a lot of product went out of Pennington at that time. It was really hard to believe just how much. Well, every field was farmed in those days. Now every field was full of houses.
Yeah, it's amazing to look at the old pictures and see that you could see across the landscape completely. There was almost almost even no woods in those days. Everything was under cultivation. So T.P. Reed, is that the grain silos across from like the Pembroke Swimming Club?
Right, yeah. He was the broker, you say, and everybody sold to him, and then he sold naturally to the big outfits. Went to Philadelphia, got on the boats. They used to have 2 different ports in Philadelphia where they sold grain, but they're gone. Yeah.
So I guess then T.P. Reed would put the grain on the railroad, because the railroad's right next to the... Yeah.
Used to fill the rail cars, right?
And then I guess Reed's, their actual and older mill was out on Old Mill Road by the Pennington Dam. Do you remember that?
No, that's... Yeah, I don't know what that was way back.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so then they actually ground grain at the site on North Main Street.
Yeah.
How did they grind grain there?
I don't know. They had the machine. We used to bring it in from the farm, and you'd stand there and wait, and it would come out the other end in bags. So they ground it, whatever they did, and blended it for you, and put molasses to it for the cows, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
What was a good yield on an acre in those days by the bushel? Yeah.
Oh, nothing like today. Yeah, nothing like today. I don't really know, but it was nothing like today.
So it's more today.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Because of the fertilizers, the chemicals, you can knock the weeds down, and shortened up the rows. They always planted corn in 36-inch rows. Now they're down to 30 inches. So you get more corn per acre, and the yield's a lot higher right now than what it used to be.
But the ground wasn't as good over on the east side.
No.
So you came over to the west side of Pennington, right. And so you had good yields there, and you continued to grow corn and wheat. And
why he got those 2 farms was where we lived, the barn had burned down, and so there was no barn on that farm. So we had the barn up at the other farm where Dr. Huffman lives today, but there was no barn, so undoubtedly that went cheaper, so he could put the 2 together.
I see.
For some reason, that's why he got the 375 acres is 2 farms together. Yeah.
And that's where you have been all these many years, since
Yeah.
around 1910. Yeah.
You know what? I'd like to go back. You guys go back far enough. I'd like to go back on the railroad. When the railroad was running in the 1850s. That's I think, a good era too. But there's nobody alive naturally.
Yeah.
On that. But that was, I think, very interesting in a township. Jacobs Creek Road was the railroad bed.
Yes.
And then it goes all the way and comes up to Pennington, keeps right on going. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure the railroad brought a lot of changes, and it changed business and so
Yeah,
forth.
it didn't
and-
run for that many years, but it
Yeah.
was. I was back here just yesterday, and I said, "There's a valley where there was a bridge goes across on our property. There was a bridge, and I said, can you believe the employees, the Irish or whoever built it, when the survey and engineers put the ribbons in the tree, said we got to build the bank up that high. You know, I said, is that guy nuts or what? We can't pile that much dirt up. You know, when you go back there and look, it's like 30 foot high, the railroad bed, you know. And he said, boy, this engineer, he's got out of it. Whack, we can't ever get that much. But they built that railroad. And
And that cuts through the back of your
yeah,
property.
across the back of our,
So, and you still own land on the north side of the railroad bed?
right, yeah.
And
It comes out here in Pennington, you know,
Yeah.
right out here, right across the street, really.
Yeah, over by the, across from the library, that shed was a building on the railroad.
Yeah.
So how did you get to the back portion of the property then with the railroad running through?
I don't know. I think it was mostly grazing.
Okay.
Probably the back fields were probably for cattle. When I was a kid, that's where the cows always went, back by the woods, and that's where the water was at, and the creeks. And I think that was mostly all grazing ground more so.
So did you always have cows as well on your farm?
Beg pardon?
Did you always have cows as well on the farm?
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know what year it was when they sold them, when we sold them, but I remember my dad saying, you're going to be sorry, boy, them cows ain't going to have no income coming in, no milk check anymore, you know. We were never sorry. Us kids celebrated. We celebrated when them cows went.
You used to have to get up pretty early in the morning to milk them?
7 days a week, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The cows are terrible. They're very, very time consuming, right? Yeah.
And that was dairy cattle, and
Yeah.
How was the milk sold?
In cans in those days. Then we had a bulk tank towards the end. And yeah, my deal was to get up and climb the silo and throw down the insulage, feed the cows, and make the school bus. Make the school bus. And I remember years later, Mr. Hutchison had just passed away, our teacher.
Yes.
I said to him one day, I said, Hutchie, I said, you never really figured it out. And he said, what was that? I said, you always put us farm kids over by the radiators. I said, you should have had us over next to the blackboard. and he said, he had mentioned it. He said, I knew who was the farmer and who wasn't by your shoes, because we had only one pair of shoes, you know. And he said, I figured that out. I said, yeah, but you never figured it out. I said, you should have put us farm kids against the blackboard.
So, and then all that manure had to get out to the fields.
Yeah, yeah. And some of it left on your shoes. You made the school bus.
So I guess
But
you had a
Pennington in those days was farmer, still, I'm talking in the 50s. I bet you a high percentage of the kids sitting in that classroom was from the farm, you know. I don't know what we graduated, went to college, but very few. Very few kids went to college. And them too.
So I guess as a youngster, what was your first farm duty? What did as you got to be 5 or 6 years old or 8?
Driving. 10 years old, driving a tractor.
Driving the tractor?
Yeah, driving a tractor. And when you got to the end of the field, shut the tractor off because you couldn't push a clutch in. You know, my legs weren't long enough to reach them. So my dad would start the tractor and then go back on a wagon, and then we'd go down the field, say we're putting up hay on a wagon, whatever. And when it got loaded, then I just shut the tractor off, and they come down, and he'd drive it in. But yeah, that was my first job. Was to let me drive.
Now, was that loose hay or baled hay?
Yeah, loose hay.
Loose hay.
And, you know, those loaders were things that was on the back of the wagon, and they brought the hay up
conveyor,
like that. One day I heard this tremendous commotion back there, and I looked back, and they were all jumping off the load, and come to find out we took a nest of black snakes up.
Oh.
It was dropping them in the wagon with them, and boys bail off the wagon.
So the hay would be cut in the field and raked, and when it got dry, you'd run that conveyor right over it, and that would pick it up right off the ground.
Yep, pick it up, make the wagon load, and take it into the barn, and then have the fork come down, pick it up, and take it in.
Up into the upper, top of the barn, and then that was obviously for the cows.
Yep. Yeah, that's the way it was done those days.
Yeah, yeah. Were those conveyors dangerous that picked the hay up out of the field?
Yeah, not really. But
I mean, certainly in those days, you're more around machinery.
Yeah. Then maybe say during the winter, you would throw the hay out of the mow into the baler, and then another baler, and put the bales back in another barn, and then sell the bales if you had surplus.
Okay, so you did have some kind of baler at that time.
Oh yeah. It was a standstill. You didn't pick up. It just made the bale where it was.
I see. And so the milk, you said at first it was in cans, large milk cans.
Yeah.
And so how many cows did you milk? And
I think we were milking about 65, I think. If I can remember right.
And you milked twice a day?
Twice a day, yeah.
Yeah, once early in the morning, once in the evening?
Yep.
And so how many cans of milk did that produce a day?
I think we used to make about 10 or 12 cans every 2 days, maybe. I can remember taking them down and putting them on a platform, and then the truck would come along. There was a local outfit that went around to all the farms and picked up cans and took them into Trenton. That was a big treat to ride on the milk truck to Trenton. You know, watch them empty the cans and clean them, and then come back again. Kind of the guy that used to drive the truck is still my friend. We talk about it every once in a while, laugh about the old days.
Yeah. So when about was that?
40s.
1940s. Yeah. So that was around the time of the Second World War too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And then of course you had field crops at the same time. You were a dairy, but you had a lot of ground, so you were raising crops in the field as well. Did you?
Yeah.
What did you raise in those days?
Again, corn and wheat, you know, and oats was a big thing, and whatever.
What were oats used for?
Feed, cow feed. Yeah. That was always the best because it didn't weigh as much. When you had a bag of oats, you didn't have as much weight. The bag of wheat, that was tough.
And did you, did you take your oats into Pennington for a grist at Reed's?
Yeah. Oats and wheat and corn, all in the same wagon. Like I say, that they grind it up for you, add a little molasses, make it sweet and whatever for the cows, and then that was a term what they called chop. That was a chopper for the feed.
Yeah.
And you had the insulins out of the silo. You put that in, and they put a little bit of that on top. Make it appetizing. So.
Yeah, yeah. Do you remember a time when you used horses on the farm?
I just came out of that. I got there just as that era was ending. We still had a couple old plugs that they were favorites they kept, pets.
More as pets at that point.
Old Abe, I used to get on him and ride down to the woods to get the cows. And he would somehow manage to get me off. And I'd have to walk all the way back. He let me ride him all the way to the woods. We get down there and play around pretty. Next thing you know, he'd have me off of the weeds.
And then what'd he do?
He just walked on home. He got rid of me though.
One way only.
I never got a two-way ride on that horse. That's the truth. Yeah. Oh well. Yeah. But like I say, there was a lot of kids in the class at that time. Well, they had an ag department at that time. They had an agriculture, and them classes were full. We even had kids like Bucky Henderson. He came up from Trenton because he wanted. They had a farm in Ewingville, but they didn't have an ag program. I had a couple kids that came in to be in that ag program.
Yeah, well, even I have a brother 4 years older. He was in the Future Farmers of America here, here at high school, FFA.
Yeah, FFA, yeah.
We used to go out and take soil samples on farmers'
Yeah,
land
uh-huh.
around here. Yeah. What do you remember about your father and his farming days?
What he did or whatever?
Yeah, what he did, yeah. Do you remember anything more about that?
Any stories? Oh, I can't tell of one. Yeah, yeah.
Now, you mentioned there were dairies all along Washington's Crossing Road.
Right.
And you were counting about 7, I think you said at one point. Where were they?
Let's see, there was Goldman's. That was the first one. Goldman's when you come from the railroad. Goldman's was the first one. Then we were second. And then Pearson's was behind the Green Tavern. And then Oldest is on the other side. And then Gerard's. And then Thompson's. And then Specker's.
Okay.
And then the park.
All right. So Thompson's would be the one where the house was down there by Independence Way, right before Jacobs Creek?
No.
No?
No, that was Gerard's.
That was Gerard's. Okay.
Thompson's was on the other side of the creek.
Okay.
There's a little cul-de-sac road goes in there, comes out right across from that church. I don't know what the name of that street is, but that was Thompson's.
Yeah, yeah. I think, yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, so both those houses are both sides of the creek. They're torn down.
Right.
Yeah, they're gone. So that's 7 or 8 dairies right now. Of course, everybody was general farming as well, I guess.
Yeah.
But you had all those dairies. So that truck pickup that you're talking about, I guess there were a few stands, platforms along the way. And
Oh, platforms, yeah, boom. Truck would come out of Harborton. It was O.E. Lewis, and they come out of Harborton, pick up all through Harborton, down, and then get us, and then go on into Trenton. Yeah.
and so they did that every day.
I think every other day. I'm not too sure. I wouldn't know what that route was. But I don't know really. I just don't know what their schedule was.
And I bet you drank unpasteurized milk on the farm.
Right, yeah.
Tastes pretty good, doesn't it?
Yeah, it was funny. My mom used to make a sour milk cake, it was called, and she'd put a couple quarts, just let them sit there till the milk went sour, and then make the cake. And today, you can't do it because you can't get the milk to turn sour the way that did. It separated, you know, the whatever, it went and whatever. And I looked in her recipe book. I can't even find a recipe. I don't know what, if that was in her head or what. But I know it was good. Everybody used to rave over that sour milk cake. But whatever.
Yeah, so you brought a little milk in every day too then to the house. You know,
Yeah,
when
you
you-
got a
when you
little
milk.
bit of things, a little bit of milk cans that we come down from the farm with it, yeah.
Now, how did you keep that cold?
At home, we had refrigerators when I was a kid. But before that, they used to have a spring house right in front of what my dad called the sheep shed building, which is across from Dr. Huffman's, that medical building. He called that the sheep shed building before he passed away, because when you had sheep in the barn, they didn't give off the body heat and the snow would stay on the roof. So you had to put a steeper roof on a sheep shed building. If you look at that building, it's got a high-pitched roof.
Yeah,
A normal cow barn had a normal roof because the cow heat would get the snow off the roof, the body heat. He called that, well, right there was the spring house for the farm, where they kept the milk.
So a spring house was a little building that cold water ran through,
they
a
had
spring ran through?
Put the milk in the bottom of that.
Before there
And-
was refrigeration, that was the way you kept something cold.
They told the story that one day they had company for lunch or dinner, and they put the milk in, and the guy said to my grandfather, he says, "Ollie, I do believe I see a frog in the milk." And my grandfather said to him, "I do believe he sees you too." So I guess that happened once in a while in the spring house. I don't know. Yeah.
Keep anything else in the spring house besides the milk? Is there?
No,
no,
just
that was.
keep cool, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Root cellars they had in them days too. And we had on the farm, we had an ice house. Used to bake ice on Stony Brook and bring it back to the farm. Matter of fact, I went to the Howe farm this year, kind of watched them and go see if it was what my dad told me, how they did it and everything. And my dad told me they would be making ice, and his job was to make a bonfire. Always had a bonfire going. mostly to keep the men warm too. But the big thing was if a horse fell in and got wet, you had to get him and put blankets over him, get him by the bonfire real quick. And why a horse would fall in is a horse would pull the blocks back up to the chute where they put it up onto the wagon. Well, every time they pull the block, the water would slush out and slush out and slush out. Pretty soon, it wasn't flat no more. It was like this. Your legs would go sideways.
Yeah.
He said, even though you had shoes with spikes, even though the horse had spikes, whoop, the feet would go out and you get a horse in the water.
So you were cutting ice on Stony Brook. Anywhere on Stony Brook, or did it need to be
Right
a
by
pond?
the bridges, by the double bridges. Yeah.
Over on
anywhere.
the-
It didn't make
yeah.
any. There was an ice pond halfway to the circle too. Every Sheffield pond. So, but they filled that ice house. It was a good sized building when I was a kid. Of course, things are bigger when you're a kid, but it was a good sized building. Walls were thick like that with sawdust. And, so it was. It held quite a lot of ice to make them through the summer.
So you're talking about slabs of ice. How big were they?
Oh, I don't know, but that was enough to make them grunt, I guess.
A couple of inches thick. And
Oh yeah, they didn't make ice until it got like a foot thick, maybe or something. And them days it was a lot colder, of course, you know.
yeah.
Up the Howe farmer this year, they had trouble making 5 inches or something. But
And then you sawed the ice out of the.
big boy.
How did you cut the ice block with some kind of saw?
Oh yeah, they had big saws that cut the blocks and whatever. They had all the just like they do it up the Howe farm there, just like the way it was done. You know? All manual labor, that's for sure.
So what happened next? The ice box?
Yeah, the Icebox came. That was the end of that. Yeah, once the Icebox came.
Yeah. No, that.
And a milk cooler too, you know. I keep the cans of milk cool.
Oh, that was a separate kind of box you had
Yeah.
in the house?
Yeah, so.
So an ice box, that's not the same thing as a refrigerator.
Yeah, no, right. First Icebox, then the refrigerator, right? Yeah. Yeah, but I can remember the Iceman coming though when the ice ran out.
Yeah, so they delivered to the farms and to the ice boxes.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about small gardening, vegetables and so forth? Did you have big gardens on the farm?
Oh yeah, there were big gardens in order, whatever. And my mom canned like crazy, you know, get us through the winter. But yeah, everybody did in those days though. Then especially during the war too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting point because of course these days people don't, you know, they can just go to the grocery store and get food year round, and it comes from all over the world, and they don't have any idea about you know, where things are actually coming from. But
Can you imagine like strawberries in December? I mean, you know, where American housewife is ruined, you know, compared to the old days.
Yeah. Well, I heard you say "get us through the winter," and that's an interesting phrase. There's a book written by an American author in the 1790s, and he basically said, you know, there's two times a year: the productive time and the time you lived on what you did. And you know, I'm interested to hear you say that because it really brings that, you know, that sense of life from the colonial times right forward to, you know, middle of the last century, that you had to live on what you did in the spring, in the summer, in the fall, as far as getting your crops in and getting your garden produce canned and all that.
Everybody pretty near had a little orchard, you know, so they'd have pears or apples, you know, they'd put up. And so it was, that's just the way it was. I mean, the people didn't know any better. It was just, you know.
Well, there weren't the grocery stores to just go and buy everything from, so you had to do a lot for yourself.
I remember going in a quality market and the fresh vegetable department was about 8 foot long. That was it. You know? I don't know what was in there, but it was just inside the door. There was a little. That was the fresh vegetables. I mean, that's all there was them days. Now it's a big department. You know.
Do you remember when Pennington Quality Market opened up on Main Street in Pennington?
No.
No.
But my mom always said she was one of the first customers.
Yeah.
She used to take eggs there, swap eggs for food. You know, whatever. I don't know.
Another practice that goes way back. Yeah. Yeah.
The McVeigh boys, and then Rosemary, Joe's wife, my mom's name was Rosemary, so they buddies. Yeah.
So was there a place in the house where you kept the canned food and
Oh yeah,
what your
down
mother-
cellar,
Yeah.
down cellar. There's still racks down there, racks and racks, shelves. String beans here, lima beans there, right around a quarter.
And that all came out of the garden
Yeah.
on your place. Yeah.
And it would be go down cellar and get a jar of this, a jar of that, a jar of that, and then you get either peaches or pears for dessert. Yeah.
And did you have chickens?
Oh yes, yeah, we had chickens. Everybody had chickens. We always said there was two big crashes on the Hoch farm: the Depression and the rabbit crash. My mom got into rabbits. We had farm little rabbits, and we had cages and cages of rabbits, which she was best selling. And somehow they got some kind of disease. They all died. It was a big crash. We call it the big crash. The second big crash. All the rabbits died. And it was like, oh my God, this is devastating. And we never did find out. I guess maybe they found out why they died, but yeah, it was the big crash.
And then you've talked about raising pheasants too.
Oh, I raised pheasants. I got raising pheasants as a hobby. And it got getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and I leveled off at 3,000. That was enough every year, and it supplied all the local gunning clubs and whatever. It was a hobby that got out of hand. It was a hobby that got out of hand. And one night we're at a party, and the fellow said to me, "Bob, how much it cost you to raise a pheasant?" And at that time I said $7. He said, "Okay." And he said, "How many you got?" I said, 3,000. He said, "Wow." He said, "You got 21,000 tied up in them pheasants?" I said, "Yep." So I seen my wife look like that, but it's good to she didn't say no. So, because she never knew what I did with the farm or whatever. And so we're riding home. She said, "You was BSing him, weren't you, about them pheasants?" I said, "No." I said, 7 3s is 21. What do you want me to do, lie to man? And she said, "Wow." She said, "You got an expensive hobby." She said, "Why did you take a bullet? That way all you have would be a pair of shoes and a ball." And I says, "Don't worry about it, hon. I've never lost a nickel yet." It was true. It was 45 years I did that, and I only had one customer never pay me. And it was really funny. And there was another one I thought never paid me. And there was a middleman, and I said to him, "Jerry, do you think that," I can't think of his name now, but he owned a bowling alley, "ever paid me for them pheasants last year?" And Jerry says, "Yeah, I think he did." And he said, "I remember giving you the check." Oh, just let it go, And it was 4 or 5 years later, I get this check in the mail, and it was a cashier's check, and it said, "Bob, I was cleaning out my desk and found this check behind the drawer." He says, "It's made out to you, and it's for pheasants."
There it was.
So I finally got paid for the ones that I thought I got hooked on, Put the check on my desk at work. Well, in a couple days, the factory burned down, and there was the check all burnt everything. And I took it up to the bank, and I says, "This check's about 2 or 3 years old and burnt and everything." And the guy looked at it, and they called the computer, and it says, "It's outstanding, it's good." So I got my money. Even it was only a couple of bucks, 50 or 60 bucks, but it was the idea. So I could go. I told my wife, "I've never got hooked. I've never got stung." It was the truth, but till then, one guy hung me.
Well, how large was your father's family on the farm? Did he have brothers and sisters on the farm too, or was just his family? And
no, our family was down in a brick house, and then my uncle's family was up where Dr. Hoffman is now.
Oh, okay.
That was they were partners, the two farms.
I see. Yeah.
And like I say, the cows were up there, horses were up there, everything was up there. Our house was just, we were always just lived down there. We had cows down there, everything when I was a kid, but then took them up there.
That's where the big barn
Yeah.
was. Yeah.
Because we never built a barn down at our place.
So back to driving the tractor. How straight did you have to drive it?
I had to stay on the road. You had to stay on the row.
On the row.
Yeah.
So you were looking at the the raked hay in front of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it went directly under the tractor, so you had no problem keeping the two wheels on.
And did you eventually, as you got a little older, did you do any plowing or anything?
Yeah, but that probably came a lot later, till they could trust you. I don't know when that started, but you get the plowing and disking. Usually you let a kid disc first, because all you do is just ride around, you know, disc or harrow. And that's better than plowing. Plowing's a little more precision, but you get that down when you get later.
Yeah, no, disking and harrowing, that's to break the soil up after you've plowed?
Yeah, after you've plowed it, yeah, I don't know how old you'd be when they would turn you loose, but you had to be able to start or stop and crank the tractor and do the clutches, so you're probably 15 or something like that.
And you had to become a mechanic somewhere along the way and keep all the tractors and everything else operational?
No, you just rode them and let them fix it. You go to school, let them fix it next day. Yeah, one time my uncle said to me, "You bust that thing again?" I said, "Well, you're not busting any of it, are you?" He says, "No." I says, "Because you don't do nothing." I said, "You get on there and drive it, you'll break it too." Yeah. So
it seems like, you know, it's the end of April right now, and I'm just beginning to see a few plowed fields around. Is this about the time that you'd first plow for?
Oh yeah, Easter Sunday this year. I even said to my family, I said, "What a relief to not have to plow." And it always was, you know, plow in the morning, eat Easter dinner, then run back out and plow again if everything was right.
Yeah.
Plow. As the neighbor. My neighbor one time, when my brother and I was plowing together, you could turn over some ground. You could turn over 5-6 acres an hour. And the neighbor, he went in the house to eat his lunch, and when he came out, we had plowed him under. And he looked, he said, "How'd you guys do that?" We said, "Well, we just did it while you were eating lunch." I don't know if he took a snooze or what, but we plowed him under this big field by his house. And he said, "Plow, plow, plow, plow. That's all you Hochs know is how to plow." That was his statement. But he was so amazed that he went to eat, and when he came back, it was done. Because he used to go out there, it would take him 2-3 days. But when we got that, we had like 9 bottoms going at one time. We could really turn it over, you know, my brother and I.
I guess when you farm and you have to work a field with machinery and you have to use gasoline to do that, you must know how much gas it takes to do each pass and what that's costing you and how that compares to what you can sell the crop for.
You have to. I always said that, you know, during the war, and there was no gasoline, but the YMCA, we had a baseball team, and the coach would come out to pick me up at the farm, and my dad would put a couple gallons of gas in his car because the farmers could get gas, you know. And so I always said, the only reason I ever played was because we got the gas off the farm. If it hadn't been for that, I'd sat the bench. But the coach made sure I played in order to get gas for the next trip. But that was a big thing in those days, was gasoline, yeah.
During the war?
During the war.
It was rationed?
Yeah. I don't know how the rationing was, but for the farmers, they got just about what they wanted. I mean, I can't ever remember saying we couldn't do a field because we didn't have the gas. So there must have been some kind of a way they controlled that.
Well, I'm sure they wanted to keep the farms going.
Yeah.
I think older sons didn't necessarily go get drafted either, did they?
No, that's true, yeah. You heard of different ones like that, right? That was before my time, really. My brother was 4F because he had a great big busted up knee and swelled up intestine from when he had appendicitis, and so he was 4F. So, but he didn't. He worked on a farm, and then he went to be a milkman in Trenton. He had 20 years as a milkman, and that he was, I don't know if he hadn't been 4F or he'd have went or not. I don't know, possibly.
And then we mentioned the chickens. That was one of the meat sources you had on the farm too, for what you ate, right?
Yeah,
so you had to...
Every farmer's wife had a little chicken eggs on the side, you know. Today you see them once in a while, fresh eggs out on free range eggs or something. You got to read that sign pretty close. You almost think it says free eggs. Yeah, but yeah, that was a little gimmick. Kept the housewife and a little money. Yeah.
Now we'll talk about the neighborhood a little more. You mentioned that there was a place called Green's Tavern.
Green Tavern.
Green Tavern. Was
Right
that a
next
color, or was the family name Green, or?
No idea. I think the door frames were painted green.
Ah,
I don't know
okay.
why it was ever called a Green Tavern. But I was about 10, 12 years old working in there. I used to go down there at night and chop ice. Ice pick with 4 prongs on it, and you shave ice, and that would go on the top of the coils, and plus in the mixed drinks. There was no ice cube makers in them days, and they would get the blocks of ice, and I would do like 4 or 5 5-gallon pails every night after school, nickel pail, chop the whole up, and do all kind of odd jobs around in there. And Adam, the guy that owned the place, we had a little code. If he rapped on the door 3 times, that meant hit the door. Because if he wasn't sure if it was ABC band, come in the front door. You know, customers coming in, and he'd go bang, 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 hit that door. That meant for me to hit the cornfield.
Because you were, you were too young to be in the building?
Oh yeah, you couldn't work in a bar room in them days.
And ABC would be alcohol and beverage control?
Yeah. And we have to always be on a go on that. But now, see, all the Navy employees were over at because of General Motors making the Corsair and Avenger. They made the Avenger, and those Navy boys, of course, they hit the West Trenton bars, but they also would walk down Scotch Road and come to the Green Tavern. And then, like I say, Saturday night, there'd be cars up and down up Washington's Crossing Road, and people in there 3 deep at the bar. But that was a big deal during the war.
Now, whatever happened to that building?
They tore it down, I guess, when they built the township there, took over.
That's where the township municipal building is now.
Yeah. And the first municipal building was the little white one behind the schoolhouse. And then they built the big new one, right? But there was, I don't know what year that was, but yeah, that's where the Green Tavern went. After it went a tavern, there was a guy in there, Ernie's Unpainted Furniture.
Oh.
He's down in Trenton.
Yeah.
Must be his son or something. We used to call him Sawdust Sam.
Sawdust Sam.
Yeah, because he built or sold unpainted furniture there. And he was there for a couple years. And then, I don't know, when the township bought that farm off Earl Stiers, I guess that's when they did the building and everything.
So, did you go to school in that little schoolhouse?
No.
No?
No, I missed that. I missed that. My sister and brother did, but they closed that. I went to Pennington on a school bus.
Went to the new building that's now the administration building.
There was a thing at that point of talking about putting the Germans in a prison camp the same as they were with the Japanese. You know, as a kid, you hear just a little bit of talking. And my dad said, don't ever let them call you a Nazi or a German. Don't let anybody ever do that, you know. So you go to school, and sure enough, there's always a wise guy. And the next thing you know, you're in a fight over the fact that you are German and their kids are calling you a Nazi. About 4th grade I was. And the teacher brought me out to the farm and said, Mr. Hoch, your son's fighting, you know. And he said, and I told him, you know, and he says, it's up to you to tell the teacher to not let them kids tease him because he's German or whatever. Well, it wasn't a couple days or a week went by, we're into it again. I socked this kid with a 2x4 that was sitting down by the fire escape. And I'm back out at the farm again in the teacher's car. And she says, your son's fighting again. My dad says, I don't care, as long as he's not to let them call him a German or a Nazi because of this rumor about putting us in a prison camp, you know. I get on a school bus. This kid calls me a Nazi, and I sock him in the head with my lunchbox. and the thermos bottle went up and hit the driver in the back of the head. So I had to walk for a week. Well, my dad says, "That's all right. You just don't let him get it. You just let him have it." And there was another kid in school by the name of Metz. He lived up on Wusamansa, and there were 2 or 3 of us German kids had to kind of protect ourselves. But that's
But
cool.
nothing ever came of that.
No, never come
worry
back.
though.
Yeah, thank goodness. Some nut German did go down there on the beach and talk to the submarines with a shortwave radio or something. They jailed him, and that made it hot on us Germans. You know, made it bad. Yeah, and Mr. Goldman, I always tell the story. I was on the front porch this day. Mr. Goldman, he had the first farm come down there, and he wanted to borrow our drill. And my dad said, "Oh, we're using it today," and this and that. And then he says, "Mr. Hoch, if you were in Germany, Hitler would make you lend me that drill." My dad says, "Don't you ever mention that someone be on his property again. You get down the driveway and you ain't borrowing a drill now." That's what he told. Yeah, at that time, that was, you know. Go to the barber shop in Pennington. I remember the barber, he made a remark, and my uncle just stood right up and walked right out about, you know, damn Germans or something. And he said, "Whew." That was a touchy subject in them days.
Yeah. Now the drill you mentioned, was that a grain drill?
Yeah.
Yeah. How did the grain drill work?
Oh, you put the grain at the top and it puts it in the rows.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
that's a planting device.
Now when he came there, Mr. Goldman was that poor, and he wound up Joanna Farms. A neighbor.
He was the owner of Johanna Farms?
He was the owner of Joanna Farms when he died.
No kidding.
Yeah.
That's
They just sold that for $65 million a couple years ago. But he started there with a backer. Somebody backed him. He had cows and whatever. But that's how poor he was. He didn't even have a drain drill. But over the years, only in America could that happen.
Yeah.
You know, he had what's called Somerville eggs. There was Somerville eggs, and he took that and went on with Joanna. Joanna Farms is Joe and Anna, his wife and his daughter's names. That's how it got to be Joanna Farms.
So that's the farm as you come out of Ingleside Avenue.
Right.
Right at the
railroad.
Getty station there,
Right.
that we'd call Zeke's. You turn right to go toward Washington's Crossing.
Yep.
Go over the railroad bridge, and you're talking about the first farm on the right.
When he was Somerville Chickens, you remember the big round chicken coop he had there? Yeah, he had the round chicken coop. Yeah, Goldman did. Yeah.
Now, did you know, I know right across the road, just a little bit to the west of the high school here, there was a farmer named Louis Scheck.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember him?
Louis come down the farm. He wanted to sell us the farm for $28,000. That was his selling price. I was all over my dad to buy it. I was, "God, you got to buy it. You got to buy it, Dad." So then we would own road to road to road to road, you know. Oh, sir, boy, he says, "I'm going to tell you something. There's going to be a day in this township you wish you didn't know nothing." That was my dad's theory on buying Louis Scheck's. There'll be a time you wish you didn't know nothing.
Now, the farmhouse from Louis Scheck's, where's that house now?
Across from Dr. Hoffman's in the field there.
It's what is that?
Insurance building.
Insurance building,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so it's on the south side of Washington's Crossing, Pennington Road.
Yeah.
If you stood there and looked up the hill toward
They
Merrill
almost
Lynch.
tore that down, and at the last minute, somebody threw a wrench at it, the Historical Society or whatever, got it stopped, and then they moved it down there.
Yeah, I think that was John and that was the Sayres, John and Ruth Sayre, I think, did that.
Quite a project, but they made it under the wires. They took the roof off of it, I think, or whatever. And yeah. Yep, old Louis Scheck's, yeah. Yeah. But at that time, the state was looking for a big parcel of ground to make a park. And that would have been perfect. I said, "It'd be perfect. That would be perfect for him. Road to road to road. We're doing the whole block, you know." He couldn't see it. Well, of course, 28,000 in 19, I don't know, probably that was before, about the 50s, I think. A good piece of money. Yeah.
So after the Second World War, how much of the 375 acres did you have in cultivation?
let's see, there's 30-some acres of woods, and then Little Hazel's woods. There was probably, let's say, 110, about 250 maybe.
Yeah, up 250
Yeah.
acres. That's
You always had to keep pasture for the cows, you know, something for them to graze on. Yeah, I would say 250 at the most.
yeah. So the pasture, did you choose different fields for the pasture in different years?
Yeah,
Kind of
right.
moved it around
You
and-
rotated them,
Yeah.
but you had to always build a fence when you rotated them, hold them in. Yeah.
And so all through the 50s and 60s, you were farming that much land?
Yeah, yeah, yep, yeah. My brother and I, we got going pretty good there for a while. I don't know what, we had 100 and some acres of beans. We were doing 250. Just my brother and I, me working in the factory and him too, you know, being a milkman. But it worked out good. He got off at like 2 o'clock when he got back from the milk route. And he'd get the field ready, then I would plant it before dark. You know, it worked out pretty good, rotation that way, but it was a lot of work.
Yeah, a lot of work, particularly in the spring.
Yeah, spring.
Yeah.
And then in fall too, combining. Yeah, so a lot of work. I don't know. We did that for quite a few years, 10 years or so. And the pheasants were time consuming. People don't realize that. That's a hobby that a lot of people get into it and get out of it, you know, because it's so time consuming.
Well, it wasn't so much a hobby because you were selling the pheasants to
Yeah.
to the gun clubs.
But it was, one year I kept a track on a piece of cardboard. Every time I went in a coop or whatever, 1 hour, 2 hours, 1 hour. At the end of the week, I'd say, Wednesday night, I ended up 4 hours, you know. I divide it by the profit. At the end of the year, it came out 35 cents an hour. So you have to say it was a hobby.
Okay. Where was the nearest gun club that you sold pheasants to?
Nearest one?
Yeah.
Oh, Kerr Ridge was right next door, Sammy Kerr's farm. And we shot about 300 ourselves. And then Cooser, Mr.
Yeah.
Cooser.
That's what I was interested in. If you knew anything about the
Mr. Cooser had 4 ring shoots a year, and plus the gun and club had 3 or 4. I sold about 700 to 800, almost 1,000 to them a year. And I was president of that gun and club, so it was again almost my own gun and club. But
and that was is that the buildings on Cooser Mountain that you reached
Yeah,
going up
now-
Strawberry Hill there?
yeah, right. That was called Canoe Mountain Gun and Club. It was probably in operation 35, 40 years. I was president for 25 years, so yeah.
So did the pheasants stay contained when you put them out?
Nope.
No. So
No, the pheasants, they always seem to disappear. The hawks and I guess the foxes and whatever. And you know, the turkey population here has just went down over the last few years. And we had a good turkey flock up there to about 3 or 4 years ago, and then it started down. And we could see a lot of predators and different ones. And so I had a trapper come in, and last year he got 7 coyotes and 32 foxes. And now this year we see the turkeys coming back again. So there's just too many predators. Nobody traps anymore. That was a big thing when I was a kid, trapping.
yeah,
Oh boy, that was a good money maker.
yeah. What did you trap?
Raccoons, foxes, and muskrats.
Muskrats. And that was
And
for
a
the
skunk
pelt.
once in a while.
That was for the pelts.
Yeah, and hey, you get 2 or 4 or 5 rats a week and a couple coons, you could be making $15, $20 a week with a trap line, and you'd be the richest kid in high school.
So and when did you do that? When did you check your traps?
Before or after milking, or even on just for the weekend. You set them just for the weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah, I was gonna say it sounds like you had a pretty full day, getting up to milk the cows, checking traps.
Right, run the trap line
Yeah.
and make the school bus. Yeah, so it was interesting.
What kind of school bus did you have in the early days? Is it the yellow school bus we know now, or is it a little different?
Yeah, we had a normal school bus. Yeah. The
Where did it
school bus
stop?
story I always liked
Yeah.
was Muff Nadir. That would be Arthur Nadir. Well, apparently the township got a wagon body of some sort and put it on a chassis and made a school bus. And this school bus had a luggage rack around like you see, you know? And Muff told me that, I don't know, he got in a fight on the bus or something, and the driver threw him off. So he run around back and went up the ladder and got on top of the bus. And he's on top of the bus. And he got a hold of that rack thing, and he leaned way over. It went to the driver, and the driver put the brakes on, and that made him flip. And he put up that, put both feet right in the hood of the bus, in the motor, and bent the hood of the bus all up. And old man Nieder had to pay for the hood job on the bus. So he says, I'll make sure next time I got thrown off the bus, I didn't get up in the roof rack. He rode. I always liked, but no, we had normal school buses.
And so you remember then Eggomatic? How did that start?
Eggomatic started back before the war. I worked there for 10 years. Yeah, but that was, of course, during the war they had rivets, and then when they got the steel back, they went back into Eggomatic again. Yeah.
And where this is the Niederer business?
The Niederer business, right? Yeah.
And where was that located?
Well, first it was up on the north end of Titusville, in the last building up. Then they moved down River Road, down below the crossing, the old dance hall. And then they came over here in 61.
Over here on 31?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that because I was in the service then.
Yeah.
I didn't help them move.
Yeah. Well, that round chicken house you mentioned a little while ago, I know Carl Niederer had mentioned that to me as being part of something about Eggomatic, whether they just bought eggs from there or what, I don't know.
Yeah, he wouldn't have nothing to do with Goldman. No. Got eggs probably from him. Well, it was a very nice business, that's for sure. It's a darn shame they just got into the foreign competition got on them, I guess. I don't know. Whatever. Yeah.
So about what year did you get married and start a family?
65.
65, huh?
Yeah, 65. I'm sorry about that. 62. Robbie was born in 65. 62.
So then you continued to live there in the brick house.
Up until then, yeah.
Yeah.
I bought that house in Titusville in 59. I bought it and I rented it out for a couple of years, and then I got married and moved in 60. Yeah. God, I get murdered for not coming up with that date, right?
So that means your father continued to live in the brick house?
Oh yeah. He lived there till he was 93 till he died. And my brother, my bachelor brother, he lived there. Then I don't know how many more years till he died. And now it's been empty the last couple of years.
But you've always gone up, and that was the farm you worked.
Beg pardon?
You always came up from Titusville to work the farm.
Yeah. Always been back and forth.
Now, do you see where were you born? Were you born in that house?
In that brick house, yeah.
Yeah. I think that.
My brother wasn't. He was the oldest one. He was the first one, and then my sister was, and I was, and my other brother was. Yeah, we're all born at home. I was born on Thanksgiving Day. I was a turkey. Born on Thanksgiving Day, and then Dr. Aby finished the job. He said, well, it's too late to go home. I'll miss my Thanksgiving dinner. So he sat down and ate one right there at the farm. And they said, I was a turkey. Well, I kept waiting for my birthday to come back on to Thanksgiving Day again. And it never would. The calendar would advance, drop back again. Advance, never get to Thanksgiving.
Wow.
I said, somebody's pulling my leg. I never was born on Thanksgiving Day. And so I found out that in 39, Roosevelt changed it, that it would always be on the third Thursday, and that way the 29th never comes again. See, that's what killed me. So now I never have it on Thanksgiving Day.
How about that?
Yeah.
So you mentioned Dr. Aby. He was a longtime doctor in Pennington.
Oh, yeah. He was a good old sugar pill doctor. Guaranteed, boy, you get the same white pill every time, no matter what was wrong with you.
Well, we have that in common. Dr. Abe delivered me, too.
Yeah, he was, well, then Doc Miller was down the south end of town, too.
Yeah.
And then Doctor, who's across the street from Miller?
Marion.
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 Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
In those days, Dr. Abe made house calls.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Doctor, who was it?
Marion.
Marion. You're right. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I'm not hearing you good.
Yeah.
Marion. So when my wife got pregnant, she said, we have to come up with a doctor. Now, Abe is wonderful. He's our doctor, but we got to have a doctor that's going to be with these kids forever, you know. And he said, hey, it's a good theory. Yeah. So her girlfriend was going to Dr. Marion. So we went to Dr. Marion. And she came into labor, and Dr. Marion said, I'll go over to the hospital, something about, and I said to her, now she was told by her lady friend that you're going to be there holding her hand. And I said, you better get the Prince in the hospital. He says, who told her that? And I told her, Janet. And he says, oh, I guess I better get the Prince today. He said, and get there and hold her hand then. Yeah, but, so, yeah, he's been right up until now. He's thank goodness he's still kicking along, you know, Dr. Marion, yeah. But that was our theory of why we got away from Dr. Abe.
Yeah, yeah. So where do you think farming is headed? How active is farming in the township now?
Well, there is some talk, you know, of abolishing this farm land assessment. I mean, we get cheap taxes.
Yes.
You know, there's every once in a while somebody comes up with a brainstorm to play with that. Well, if they play with that, I don't know what'll happen to farming, because that's the only thing kind of like keeps them going right now, is that that there's cheap ground or whatever, because there's years that there's very little profit. Guys seem to be able to make it, and it goes back to getting bigger, and bigger, and bigger, and bigger. The big will survive. The little guy, he's just playing around. He's matter of fact, he's putting a dent into the big guy because he plays around with it, with the market, you know. Couple thousand, like us, we had 3,000-4,000 bushel, where somebody else 10,000-20,000 bushel. They're the ones that the money, it should be right. But farming, I don't know. We were out west, went out there turkey hunting and whatever. There's guys out there doing 5,000 and 6,000 acres. You know, they produce the food. They're the ones that's doing the job. This New Jersey is a joke. What we put into the food basket, but it's still other guys that bigger.
Well,
and bigger.
I see more with organic farming being done around here, and I'd also say that, you know, what a lot of people don't realize is that, you know, there's a lot of transportation to get the food to us from where it's grown at this point, and the varieties of food have to be varieties that travel well, that, you know, can bounce around and so forth and so on. So, you know, I think there's maybe a room for some specialty farming and organic farming and locally grown stuff. I think maybe that'll get stronger as time go by. I don't know what you think about that.
I know there's a couple guys playing with that, and it of course takes 3 years to get into that. You know, you have to set the ground aside for 3 years to get it certified and whatever. Of course, they get more money for their products, but if you're going to get into vegetables and stuff, hey, there's a lot of hours of work. There's a lot of time there playing with carrots and whatever. And of course, our soil's not good for that. South Jersey, terrific, but up here, you know, we're not potato and carrot and radish type territory.
We're still more wheat and corn.
Right, yeah. But there's guys getting into it and everything. They slap that title on there to get more money for it. But you brought up a good point. Transportation. If you're a farmer today, the only place you can get rid of your soybeans is down in Purdue. I mean, you got to haul all the way to Delaware. I mean, the old days, you came there to Pennington, dumped the load, and went home. You know, you could have an old truck, you could have tractor and wagons, but today you got to have a $100,000 tractor trailer, or somebody has to do it for you and charge you $1 a mile. I mean, my God, after a while, you're looking out back, there goes half the profit off the load, you know. And it gets expensive today to get rid of your product out of here If you were closer to South Jersey, maybe, or something. But in this area, trucking is an added expense that was never there before.
You need markets. You need access to
To
markets.
get to the market, right? Yeah.
Yeah. You ever think about corn and ethanol?
That's a fallacy. A lot of them ethanol places are going bankrupt out west right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they can't make it for less than $1.60 a gallon or something like that. That's about the cheapest they can make it for, and gasoline really doesn't cost that much, you know. It's the taxes that makes it $2 a gallon, you know. But I think last year there was 80 ethanol plants went bankrupt out west. So they're not, and there was less corn planted last year than acreage-wise in the country than there was the year before. But people's under that fallacy that corn did it. Corn didn't do it. I don't know what did it, but corn, like I said, there was less acreage than there was the year before.
And when was your last, big years of full farming, the whole farm?
Oh, yeah, I had soybean, I sold the combines. It's probably been 8 years ago now, 6, 8 years ago.
And what were the last big profitable crops that you had?
Soybeans.
Soybeans?
That's, yeah.
And you said they went to Delaware. That's where they were sold.
Yeah, right. You had to hire a truck, you know, load them on a truck, haul them to pay. Then it was 50 cents a bushel. Now it's probably $1. I don't really know what it is. But,
And you said that was Purdue, the chicken company?
Yeah, or Mount Joy, Pennsylvania. There's a big granary out there. But even last year, at one time, I know Barry Taylor, he said that they couldn't get rid of them. The elevators were all full. There was, you couldn't move them when you wanted to.
Yeah, that's why you're bringing up, several of the difficulties with farming. You don't always know what the market's going to bring you. Some years it costs you more to grow than in harvest than it does for what you
I don't
get.
know what fertilizer settled down to this year. I seen them spreading fertilizer on our place yesterday. I don't know what it settled down to per ton, but God, they were talking terrible prices back there 2 or 3 months ago. So I'll have to ask around, but
in some years the weather's not good and you don't get much of a crop. Other years there's too much.
In farming, I always had it figured out. You only got 8 crops out of 10 years. You know, and back here a few years ago, deer got eating us up pretty bad. The deer's a problem, and they got on us real bad back here. Well, 6, 8 years ago, the deer herd was double what it is now. We lost like 65 acres to the deer.
Yeah, well, Sam Kerr told me the same thing. He had a year with soybeans where he was just basically feeding deer.
I had a farmer tell me the other night in the wildflowers that he shot 91 deer last year. One farmer in Hopewell Township.
Okay, and that's probably not legal?
Oh yeah, you can get a permit to shoot.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we never got into that. I couldn't do that, but a lot of them they do, and 2 or 3 different ones. But this guy, that's what he told me the other night. I didn't think much of that, but he's got to make a living. Try to.
Yeah, got to protect his crops.
Yeah. I don't know how many years ago that they first started shooting them and having doe days and stuff, but that was they had to. It was brutal. I mean, I don't know what the car deaths are now in Hopewell Township, but there ain't too many roads you can't ride on that they're in a deer laying in a ditch. You know. So, and that's they eat a lot. They eat 40 pounds a day. Yeah, they munch away on a soybean field, boy. You just see right from the woods out. You can just see as they go up. Yeah. Yeah. So and you're fighting the weather. That's what I say. If you get 8 crops out of 10 years, you're lucky. One year we had the hailstorm. Oh man, we didn't even take the combines out of the barn. Just stripped them. We had a tremendous. You remember that year? Well, I don't know what year that was. It was one of it just stripped everything. The hailstorm. We had like 3 inches of hail in an hour. It was just from the top of Scotch Road to Woodsamonsa to Princeton to the river right here. Whoosh. And it just killed everything. One-sided all the trees. took all the windows out of the houses, bent up all the aluminum houses, bent up the car hoods and roofs. Were you around here then?
I don't remember that. Or maybe I was in New York.
67 or something like that it was.
Oh.
Mike Kuzer had a book that said the worst storms of New Jersey, and it was listed in there of the Mercer County hails. I came out of Trenton, and I passed the car down on Scudder's Falls, and he had snow on the back window, you know. I said, whew, he must have came from Canada, you know. It was in October, you know, so I mean, you don't know what's going on up there. I said, wow, look at that snow on the back of that car. It must have snowed, you know. Got off on Scotch Road, come up on top of that hill, and it was white, winter wonderland. Just 3 inches of snowball, ice balls that big.
Do you remember the big dairy that was up Scotch Road where Merrill Lynch is now?
Oh yeah,
What was that?
Sheffield Farms.
Sheffield Farms?
Oh yeah, we played around in the barns and in the silos and rode our bicycles over there. And like somebody came for me and said, you know where the dump was at? I said, yeah, it's under 95. it's on the ramp that comes down when you come from West Trenton. They get on the 95 right there. I said, there's a dump right there.
Yeah. Now, were there a number of separate farms on that side of the road then? Did the dairy own different old farms?
On Scotch Road?
Yeah.
Yeah, right after them was Gus Gellings, his farm. That's like where the runway is on the airport now. When you go like that, and there's an insurance building back in there. That was a Gus Gellings farm.
Well, I was thinking on this side of 95, between Washington's Crossing Road and 95, where Merrill Lynch owns 2/3 of that now.
Right.
Not the close part, but were there 3 or 4 farms on that
The next
side
one
of the
down
road?
was Foster's. Fred Foster's, that's on top of the hill. Jacobs Creek comes out, and you hump like that in the creek. And then after that, it was no houses. And then Sammy Kerr comes in the back of all them. You know, Kerr's comes all in the back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I was thinking on the east side, where Merrill Lynch is now. Is that where we're talking? On the east side, where Merrill Lynch is now?
On the east side of Merrill Lynch, that bucks up against the railroad.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. I'm talking about the Merrill Lynch property itself.
No, that was all one.
That was all one.
Except that first field, as you come over the bridge, railroad bridge, that first 16-acre field, that belonged to Goldman's. And I don't know, no, Merrill Lynch owns it now.
I mean, I just knew that historically, where Merrill Lynch is, there were 2 or 3 separate old farms, but I guess they were gone before.
Oh yeah, Sheffield had that whole block. Sheffield had that whole block when I was a kid.
Now, did they have cows on the property? Did they have large barns on the property?
Beg pardon?
Did they have cows on that property?
Oh gosh, yeah. Yeah, that's what they were, a dairy farm. Took all the milk to New York City. And Dublin Road went right on across, you know, went right on in there.
Yeah.
And then there was a great big building. Another big cow barn on this side of that little woods. Big cow barn, and they called it the dry barn. That's where they kept cows that were going to have babies. And great big tenant house. Again, as you're a kid, things are bigger than what they really probably were, but there was 3 or 4 families lived in there, so it had to be a fairly big tenant house. And then you went over to the main farm, and of course you went by the barn, and that's Bungalow Row. That's where all the bungalows were. And then another big boarding house. The concrete driveway where they're going in and out to the hospital, another big boarding house. 2 or 3 families or so. I got a good aerial picture of that. If you want to see it.
Yeah, we would like to see that. And,
Yeah.
We said scan some of these images in. We'll put them right
I got
with
it from Azaris, from Carl and Bob. But it's of the farm down. Aerial picture. That was a big outfit. It had 12 silos. And yeah, put a lot of time in. We were kids over there playing around. Because there was kids lived in that Bungalow Row, and in them boarding houses, the Johnses, the Lays, all them, they made the school bus, you know. So they come out of there, and them houses were way back off the road. School buses didn't have no heat on them. You'd be sitting out there on a 0 morning in a school bus, and one John's kid would make the school bus, and about that time another would break out of the house, you know. I said, go without him, go without him. We'll be chanting on the bus. We'd be back there freezing, go without him. The kid would just about make the bus, another one would break out of the house. Oh, Jesus. Let him home, let him home. Yeah, many a day we went through that. Yeah.
I guess indoor plumbing came along at some point, but you always had that probably, I don't know, or did you get your indoor plumbing a little later?
Later.
Yeah.
Always later. Everything was always later. With my dad and my uncle. Mm-hmm. My uncle, God bless her, married a woman from hillbilly up on a Charlotte Mountain. She was a hillbilly. And she talked real slow and didn't really get too excited about anything. And she was just sitting there. And as one of my friends said, he's the only woman he ever knew that wore out a rocking chair. She wore out the rockers. He said they're usually wood about that thick. They were down to that thin for her rocking. He said, she always said, you dig your grave with your spoon. So you go to, my mom would say, and her name was Zilli. He said, Zilli, is that what you got for supper? You know, my mom, she'd be down there whooping up mashed potatoes, the whole deal. She'd have boom, 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 boom on a plate. You know, it looked like they were on a diet all the time. You dig your grave with your spoon, you know. So the old cat did go to 90-some years old, so maybe she knew what she was talking about. I don't know. But, yeah. She was just one from the old school, come off the side of the mountain up there by Hillbilly Hall. Which in them days was Hillbilly Hall. You know.
Yeah, folks up there in the mountain lived up there in the, I guess, in the rocks, as they used to say.
In the rocks, yeah. Yeah. You go in that road, and just before Hillbilly Hall, there's a place there supposed to be one of the oldest houses in the township. You ever get in that argument with them? It was like a half a log cabin there on the right-hand side, and then the Augustinos and all them.
Yeah, no, I don't know that.
Continuation of Featherbed Lane,
Yeah.
and then on that right-hand side, there's one in there supposed to be one of the, that's where she come out of. Not moving too fast, I'll tell you that. We always got a kick out of something. Yeah.
All right. Well, do you think we've missed any subjects this morning?
Oh my goodness, who knows? I can always think of something, you know. Come up with a story one time or the other. Some of them I can't tell you.
Did you know the oldest?
Oh my goodness, yes.
Gary?
The oldest was, they were a different breed of cats.
Yeah.
You know, they came out of North Jersey when development pushed them out of there. They came down to Hopewell Township, down in the cheap ground, and, you know, I mean, it was often got down here, and they lived on the other side of the road first, you know. They lived over in the Woolsey place.
Oh, okay.
And when they lived there, they would claim, they were daughters of the American Revolution, the girls. They would claim that that was the oldest house in the township, not OLDIS, you know, I mean, the oldest house in the township.
Oldest.
Well, then when they moved over to the big farm, then that one got to be the oldest house in the township. Whatever. The girls were very nice. And Richie and Charles, God, they were great. They were great people, the oldest. They were. Two old maids, 2 old bachelors, and
it was Gary.
Maud. You know, Maud was our teacher in school.
Right, I had Maud.
And when I went to visit her, she says, "Bobby, I've had a stroke," and she said, "I can't spell a thing. I can't even spell my own name." And I said, "Maud, let's have a test." Let's have a test, because you used to stick us with annalita and Grashstetter and all these great big biological words. We couldn't spell none of them, so let's have a test today. Let's have a test. I'll give you a test today. And she laughed. She said, "I can't even spell my own name." But she did come around that she could write before she passed away. But yeah, they were a different breed of cats, you know.
Yeah. No, there was Gary Sr. and Jr.?
Yeah, Gary, he left the farm. Yeah, Gary, he whatever. And then Junior, actually, he come out of the Marines. He had bought a lot of equipment and started house moving and bulldozing the whole 9 yards. But old Gary sold insurance.
Right.
Yeah. And John, the other brother, he lived on top of the hill. He was state police, MV, motor vehicle. And then there was a division, state police and motor vehicle. He was motor vehicle. Yeah. But the other four stayed on the farm. Yeah. They were they had a dog, Spotty, and their nephew, John's boy, we'd be hitchhiking, and they ride right on by us. They wouldn't pick us up. They wouldn't pick us up. Here goes my aunt and uncle. You know, my aunt. They wouldn't pick us up. They wouldn't pick us up. So we're down at the house. There was, hey, you wouldn't pick us up. Well, you boys have dirty clothes on. Oh, we have dirty clothes on. No kidding. How about the dog? He's jumping back and forth beside the seats. That mutt. He look out the back window and go like that to us, you know. But we'd have to walk. But the dog could ride in the car. There's anything dirtier than a dog jumping back and forth the seats in the car? But that was okay.
Yeah.
Spotty could get away with it, but we couldn't get a ride. We had to walk. Yeah.
You mentioned Gary Olis's house moving business. Did you ever see a house get moved? Or?
Oh, I rode in one of them.
Yeah?
I rode when it took Herbie Hunt's house across that of AT&T's property.
Oh, yeah.
Across over there on Blackwell Road.
Right.
I rode in that baby. It told us, you watch the glass of water. If any water falls out of the glass, you holler out the window. And they took that house across that field just as smooth.
Now, Herbie's house was right at the end of Blackwell Road, across.
Yeah.
Across on Federal City in that little patch of woods there.
Yeah.
And now where it went is on the next section of Blackwell Road.
Yeah. Before the creek.
Before that creek.
Correct,
yeah.
Right. Now you're Blackwell. How'd you get what one? Anything there?
What's that?
Any relation to that?
Oh yeah. No, that's I guess the first section of Blackwell Road between Pennington, Lawrenceville, and Federal City was named for Joe Blackwell's family. In fact, there's an old ledger in the township for the post office that says Joe Blackwell's Road. And they lived there where the gas line comes across. And that was, you maybe knew Cornell Blackwell and Harold Blackwell and Alice Lewis and so forth. That was their place. And they're my relatives.
Your nephew or something?
No, a little further back. My family was on Elm Ridge Road.
Elm Ridge?
Elm Ridge, out at the far end of Elm Ridge Road.
Oh, yeah.
And that's where...
Ubers, they moved that house out off the AT&T too.
Yeah, is that the one, just before the big old farmhouse?
Yeah.
Well, I know there was another one there too that was, the fire company burned down where that parking lot is now.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, that was Blackwell's with a Crotzelhart bun.
Right.
Yeah. That was Blackwell's.
Yeah.
Well, Stout lived in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was in my class, Dick Stout. Now,
Oh, Dick Stout. They're related, yeah.
Yeah, you're related.
Yeah.
He married married into Blackwell.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then you're talking about the next place where I guess he was a physical therapist or something, doctor. That house came from across the road.
Really? Yeah.
Straight across the road.
I think Gary moved them all, didn't he?
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't realize it was Gary that moved them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably. If he did Herbie's, why wouldn't he? He had the contract probably with AT&T
probably,
or something.
Right. And then I think over on the far side where Van Kirk Road comes into Cold Soil, there was a Pearson house there.
Okay. Yeah.
It got moved up to the intersection of Blackwell and Cold Soil when they put all those, on that AT&T property over there when they took all the houses off.
Well, Terhune, he moved into Pennington, Terhune's Orchard. I don't know why Stanley moved to Pennington. I never really get that straight, but I think he moved to get away from the traffic that coming in the driveway all the time. And he had his employee live in the house. And anyhow, so that brought the boy to Pennington. And somehow I befriended him. So I spent a lot of time in the Terhune's Orchard. Terhune's with my friend Dick. And we would go to basketball games, and then we'd go out there and press cider to 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. The old man wanted that tank full for Saturday morning, And so I put a lot of time in Terhune Orchard too. And matter of fact, I was talking to Gary Mount. I said, last year, I says to him, "Are there 2 cherry trees down there in that back corner?" And he smiled. He said, "There was only one when I bought this place." He says, "You knew about them." I said, "Oh, God, them cherry trees. We used to get up in them cherry trees, and big white cherry trees, white cherries, whatever they were. Oh, geez. Every year we waited for them. We were like the blackbirds. We waited till that cherry tree got ripe, you know." But yeah. Well, yeah, that you being a Blackwell, then the barn that I hated to see go down was Ben Hart's barn.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny, at that time, I was, when it went down, I was taking an old fella from Bucks County, where my kid lived with him, in his apartment, to the hospital, Princeton Hospital. And he was on the barn commission of Bucks County and stuff. So he was barn oriented. And we go by Ben Hart's there. He used to make me stop. And he'd stop and he'd look in this and that and he'd talk about it. He said, "They're going to let that go down. I know they're going to let that go down." And he was all worried about that.
Yeah, I tried to convince that owner that it would cost him as much to take it down as it would be to fix it, but he wasn't interested.
Really?
Yeah.
In one of the farming magazines, they had an article a few months ago about Minnesota is quite concerned about it. They're losing like 5,000 barns a year in Minnesota, and they want to get it stopped. If they said this has got to stop. It's just, but they didn't know what they were going to do about it. But the article was a good article about how to get this stopped.
You know, the back of the back side of the roof of Ben Hart's barn, maybe both sides of it, was just saplings. It wasn't even rafters.
Really?
Yeah, it was just all saplings laid up in there, and he used to have to climb up there and patch holes and so forth. I can imagine him going up there like that, because that was a long, steep slope, that back slope of that barn.
Well, you know that on the Shasma farm, the barn with the 3 cupolas, my dad was about 10 when they were come in that era. But they built that barn, so that makes it about 1905.
Yeah.
I would say that barn was built. And he climbed up in this after the workers went home and froze. He was afraid
to come down.
He started screaming, and they had to get the workers back to get him out of the top of that cupola down. So we always called that my dad's barn. It was a joke, you know. "Hey, Dad, there's your barn." He said, "Oh, I don't want to think about that."
Well, we're talking about the farm on Old Mill Road.
Yeah.
On the northeast side of the road.
Yeah.
And that barn is very, we'd say iconic. It has those 3 cupolas on the top, and everybody knows it. It's an image of, of Hopewell Township, and that was one of Kunkel's farms.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And that's one of the places that your grandfather probably lived at one point.
He lived there in what they call the Fitzgerald's house. Fitzgerald's bought it after the Hochs got out of there, the brick house with the pillars.
Yeah, that's the one going out East Delaware Avenue on the right.
Yeah. Well, it's really funny. Before they ever put that housing development then on the Curlis Hart farm, or just after the Fitzgerald's place, I heard my dad call that the presidential farm or something. And darn it, they didn't up and name that development Presidential Estates.
Oh, yeah?
I don't know where they ever come up with that.
Yeah, no, I had never heard that. I mean, I know the Modern Development's named that, but I didn't
Presidential Estates and stuff. But I heard my dad call that area for some reason that name at one time.
Yeah, no.
I always was wondering where they come up with that name at, because nobody ever knew that, Pennington in those days.
Yeah, well, Kunkel was the guy who came to Pennington around 1890 and was sort of the first promoter developer of the town. He's responsible for Eglantine Avenue and some of those houses on Eglantine, and he got the citizens of Pennington to tear down their fences, because everybody's property, even in town, had a board fence around it, and most of them falling down and looking pretty ugly and so forth. And he wanted to promote the town, so he kind of influenced everybody to clean the place up. And I guess he owned about 3 farms then, it sounds like, because I think he owned what was the Ketchum farm that came almost all the way into Pennington on the north side of East Delaware and went out to Stony Brook. And then you said he had the Fitzcharles farm, which is opposite that. That was about 70 acres. And then the farm on Old Mill Road, where you're talking about, You said your dad built that barn, or was involved with the people who built that barn?
No, what was that?
I guess your father was young when that barn was built.
Yeah, when it was built, right, yeah.
Okay, so,
Right.
and so I guess Kunkel probably built that barn.
Built that barn.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, we had a school trip when I was a little guy, 4th grade or whatever, and we went up Stony Brook over to the double bridges, which and back, and the teacher told us it was an Indian trail. We're walking on Indian trail area. So I went home at night, and I said, Dad, we walked up Stony Brook, up that Indian trail. That ain't no Indian trail. I used to drive cows up that. That's a cow trail. So I go to school the next day. That's not an Indian trail. My dad used to put cows up there. Well, I guess you know I was not the hero of the class then, you know. Your dad told you that? I said, hey, he used to drive cows up and down there. So that was the end of my Indian trail.
Yeah, well, I think we do think that Pennington Rocky Hill Road is an ancient trail, but you're talking about a different trail off that?
No, right alongside the brook, right alongside the brook, all the way along, like where a guy would stand and fish, all the way down to the park. There was quite a trail there at that time.
Yeah, I see.
And the cows had scuffed in quite a kill, you know.
Yeah, well, there's a barn. There's a barn on that side of the road, the west side of the road, I guess, where the sewer plant is.
Oh,
Is that Rossiter?
Rosswellers, yeah. I don't know anything about that. Yeah, that came later, I guess. Whatever, I don't know what they did or whatever. Yeah, Freddie sold out of there, right? But yeah, then the next was Skid and Lacamar, it was called, which is mobile now.
Yeah.
Is Skiddy and his partner.
Yeah, that's where George Kerr is now.
Yeah, where Georgie's at.
Yeah.
And the guy on the other side, Rogers, right by the Mill Road, comes out. Farmer Rogers. That's where all the kids' school trips went, out to Farmer Rogers. Yeah. But, yep. Well, we went on a school trip up to, let's see, I'll think of her name now. The Bukowski's farm. That's on the one that goes through the middle of the golf course. What's the one up by the golf course? Titus Mill Road? Rose Mill, right, where Collins, not Collins, Sean's parents lived. Well, the Kopsk farm. We're into pigs at that time, in the school studying pigs, and we up there, and the teacher all leaning over the rail looking at the pigs, and he says to me, the teacher said, "Hoch, what brand of pig is that?" I looked, and I said, "I don't know what brand it is, but I know she's a 12-cylinder." I guess I didn't get too much credit for that. I said, yeah, she's a 12-cylinder. But that was one of my school trips.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, they did that with that Future Farmers deal. Another one was outside of Hopewell, was at King's Grant, right across from the Blue Bottle. You know. Now we refer to places by restaurants because that's all you do as a senior citizen is eat. Go to restaurants. Last night we're in the airport. You know, tomorrow night, my little granddaughter up in Maine, the mother-in-law up there said to her, "Let's go to lunch today." She's 4 years old. "Where would you like to go today?" She says, "Wildflowers." She says, "I'm sorry, honey, it's too far away." Yeah. So like even the kids know restaurants now. You don't know an area by a certain thing. Now you know where the restaurant's at. Yeah. Oh well. Well, you know, on that Washington's Crossing Road, there was another bar room too, down on top of the hill. Squax Arena, it was called. You could get your head punched in there in a minute.
That was on the hill?
White House, it was called, Squax Arena. As you're going up the hill, after, Unitarian Church, Old Washington Crossing Road comes out, and then you go up the hill. Right there on the left-hand side, there was another bar room. That was there. And, of course, there was Sweaty Parker's Bar and Grill at the Circle. And there was enough places to get loaded up in them days. But, yeah, I got my education in that Green Tavern. You couldn't help but see the bad effects of alcohol with the drunks and stuff. And then there was a lot of nice people too. And it was really, put a lot of time in there as a kid. But like I say, bang on the door, that meant hit it. Hit the back door and get going. Because you know, I guess the ABC at that time was kind of tough on some kid in the bar.
Regulating those places.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, all right. I think we've had a great discussion here this morning, and we can probably think of some more things to talk about another time.
I didn't help you out any or give you any good facts, maybe. I don't know.
Well, no, we understand a lot better, what life was like and what the crops were and how things went.
Just in time to make the farmer's lunch. 12 o'clock every Saturday in Harbor's Chicken Coop, the local farmers have a luncheon. And it's right now, 12 o'clock. I'm going to miss my farmer's luncheon.
Oh, well, you better head over there then. Well, thanks an awful lot.
They have a gunning club that started this years ago, and I don't know, there's 5 or 6 of us farmers go there and other people, and they always have a theory that in every lunch there has to be something eaten off of the farm. And after I was going there for a while, one day they had oyster stew. And I said to them, "What is off of the farm with this oyster stew?" And they said, "Parsley." I said, "Oh, excuse me." So, yeah, that's quite the thing. Irwin, he invites a lot of different people over there on a Saturday. So I don't want to be late for lunch.
All right, real good. Well, I'm glad
I don't miss lunch. Oh, what's that? Oh, microphone.
Oh, that's right. We can't walk away with the mics.
Oh, my God, something's dragging me back here.
Is that the Harbor farm?
Huh? The Harbor, yeah.